Chapter 11 The S-Class Killer Who Gave Away People's Heads. Please give me flowers and collection. On the 26th floor of the New York hotel, an old man wearing black clothes and a black hat walked up with a group of burly men. He looked at the two dilapidated rooms and nodded. Men armed with various cleaning equipment and heavy absorbent blankets immediately swarmed in and began cleaning up all traces of the scene. A few hours later, Ye-Ling opened her eyes in the luxury hotel room. Yesterday, he spent half the night, killing a group of well-equipped killers, and chasing the enemy across 100 meters in the air. But just after taking a nap, Ye-Ling recovered and became energetic. He felt the good touch in his arms, like the warm fragrance of warm jade, and the faint fragrance hit his nostrils. Ever since he awakened the Golden Superman bloodline, Ye-Ling's five senses have become particularly sharp. Some women who look good will immediately reveal their true colors under Ye-Ling's strong eyesight and sense of smell. The smell of those nasty perfumes was simply unbearable to him. But the fragrance on Lorna's body is very natural, nice, and refreshing. Ye-Ling lowered his head and glanced at Miss Polaris in his arms, and saw that Lorna's exquisite facial features were like those of an angel, and her long eyelashes were trembling slightly. Lorna looks extremely innocent while sleeping. No one would have thought that the cool, sassy, and aloof young lady in the future would have such a cute and innocent side while sleeping. Polaris's perfect face and tall and graceful figure are like a work of art, impeccable, which Ye-Ling admires very much. At this moment, there was a knock on the door, and at the same time a voice came from outside the door, "Sir, your breakfast has arrived." After hearing the sound, Polaris Lorna woke up immediately and looked around alertly. Then, she found herself in Ye-Ling's arms again without knowing when. Feeling the increasingly familiar temperature, Polaris raised his head and looked at Ye-Ling's handsome face and star-like eyes, pretending to be calm and said, "Have you had enough hugs?" Ye-Ling let go of his hand, smiled and said nothing. At this moment, the door was opened, and a waiter pushed the dining cart into the living room and said in a humble tone from outside, "Guest, if you are not awake, I will put breakfast here first." Polaris glanced at Ye-Ling. "Have you ordered breakfast?" Ye-Ling shook his head. Seeing Ye-Ling's actions, Polaris immediately looked toward the door with vigilance. Ye-Ling took his time. Since someone wanted to die, let him help him. Just as the two were silent for a while, the killer outside the door noticed something was wrong and pushed the door open directly. The moment the gunman came in, he aimed his weapon in the water at Ye-Ling. The weapon in this man's hand was very strange. It looked like a modified pistol, which was larger than an ordinary pistol, and there is a black cylindrical mark on the barrel of the pistol. After seeing the strange-looking weapon, Polaris' expression changed. She had seen this type of firearm once before, and she recognized the markings on the pistol. The bullets fired from this gun cannot be controlled by Polaris and are incredibly powerful, specifically targeting the existence of mutants. Last time, one of their comrades with strong defense was killed in one blow by this special firearm. At the critical moment, Lorna shouted, "Get away!" Before Polaris could warn him, Ye-Ling had already moved. He dodged and walked directly to the door, then kicked the door. There was only a muffled groan, and the killer behind the door who was about to shoot had already vomited blood and flew out. Ye-Ling dodged again and followed. When he came to the killer, he already had the pistol the killer had just used in his hand. He looked at the weapon in his hand curiously, then pulled the trigger. Just a soft sound was heard, and the killer's head had exploded. Then at this moment, a ghost-like figure rushed out from the blind corner. A cold light flashed for a moment, and several sword flowers bloomed around Ye-Ling. Ye-Ling raised his eyebrows when he was suddenly attacked. This killer's movements were very fast and his skills were very good. Being able to develop such complex skills into muscle memory, the strongest attack can be unleashed like lightning in an instant. Such exquisite killing skills cannot be achieved without repeated training. However, even this kind of peak skill is only a mortal skill after all. After the sword flashed, the blossoming swords converged into a fatal blow, piercing Yeling's throat. Then, the proud smile on the killer's face solidified. The sharp blade coated with poison was about to touch Yeling's skin, but it couldn't make any progress. Because Yeling had already clamped the blade firmly with 2 fingers. No matter how hard the killer tried, the dagger seemed to be welded to those 2 fingers and remained motionless. This inevitable blow failed. This is a situation that the killer has never encountered before. Seeing that the killer couldn't get the dagger back despite all his strength, Yeling shook his head and said, "What age have we been and are still engaging in traditional assassination? I really think I have taken a leap of faith. Look at me, America, showing off my martial arts." After saying that, he raised his hand and fired. Before the killer could react, his head had already exploded. Yeling understood that this should be an energy weapon, just like the weapon developed by Hydra based on the space gem. He put his hands together and twisted the weapon into a twist, then dragged the 2 bodies into the deserted corridor. At the moment Yeling said calmly, "Don't say I won't give you a chance. If there is another time, I will go to the Continental Hotel to visit in person." Then he pointed to the 2 corpses on the ground and said, "You have to pay the price for what happened this time. The compensation cannot be less." Just after Yeling left the corridor, several men in black jumped down from the ceiling with guns in the originally deserted corridor. After taking a look at the killer who was still holding a dagger before he died, the faces of several men changed drastically and they immediately left the place in a hurry. At the moment in the room, Yeling pushed the dining cart to the bedroom, opened the covered food and took a look, and the aroma was fragrant. "Well, this tastes like top-quality steak, and there are no additives, it is very clean, and the heat is well controlled." While Yeling and Polaris were enjoying the food, Winston, the manager of the Continental Hotel, had already received the news. Winston, who had always kept his emotions secretive, looked solemn at the moment. Winston, who was silent for a while, shook the red wine glass in his hand, causing the blood-like wine to emit a blurry scarlet light. He frowned and asked Karen, the black butler beside him, "Is the news true? Has Grey Shadow really failed?" "Sir, this is the news we got." Karen's face was a little solemn, and it was definitely impossible for others to tell his mood from his face. Winston, holding a wine glass in his hand, thought intently, "Now we're in trouble. You must know that Grey Shadow is just like Night Demon. They are both S-class legendary killers and urban legends. They can complete any task no matter how difficult it is. Killers of this level have failed. How powerful is this mutant named Yeling? The Continental Hotel has been able to survive to this day because of its ability to have both sides. This good habit cannot be lost." Thinking of this, Winston drank the red wine in his hand and dialed the phone in his hand. Chapter 12 Settling in New York. Please give me flowers and collection. In the lavishly decorated private office of Strack Group, Dr. Campbell is waiting for good news. Even if tens of millions of dollars were spent, he didn't believe that mutant could withstand the continuous assassinations. Campbell believed that he would soon be able to obtain the experimental materials he wanted. At that time, he will know why the mutant named Yeling is so powerful. At this moment, the phone rang, and Campbell quickly picked it up. The voice of the hotel manager Winston came from inside. "I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell, the Continental Hotel has suffered heavy losses due to this mission, so it can only cancel this mission. The bounty and corresponding compensation for this mission have been returned to the corresponding account." This hotel hopes to continue to provide you with excellent service next time. After saying this official line, the other party hung up the phone. After being stunned for a while, Campbell cursed fiercely, "What a waste." After a moment of hesitation, he hurriedly left the office and came to Lieutenant General Allen's office. "Lieutenant General Allen, our plan failed. The Continental Hotel cancelled the mission." Campbell was a little uneasy as he spoke. As a private military contracting group, they need to act based on Lieutenant General Allen's face, otherwise there will be no business at all. If Lieutenant General Allen is offended because of this matter, the group's life will definitely not be easy in the future. Who would have thought that after listening to Campbell's report, the old man with grey hair and sharp eyes did not take this matter to heart at all. He smiled slightly. "If a small continental hotel can solve that mutant, what else do we need to do?" Upon hearing this, Campbell felt confident. He immediately understood that the general had already had a complete plan, and now that the time was ripe, he began to make the real plan. Sure enough, Lieutenant General Allen clapped his hands, and a gentle man wearing glasses walked in. The man introduced himself very politely. "Lieutenant General Allen, I am Elton, the Chief Scientific Officer of Osborne Group. Our president is extremely interested in mutants' genes. Therefore, we will also participate in this operation to provide your brave soldiers with more powerful equipment and support." After hearing this, Campbell was also surprised. It turned out to be the Osborne Industrial Group. You must know that it is a giant company, a real arms giant. With this amount of capital joining, this operation must be stable. At the moment, Lieutenant General Allen was also very satisfied. The Osborne Industrial Group has just donated US $300 million in military expenditures and provided a large number of high-tech weapons. Now the boys will definitely show their strongest fighting power. This cooperation will be beneficial to both of us. This is the safe house you were talking about. It doesn't seem very safe. In a remote place in New York, Yeling looked at the ruined safe house in front of him and joked. He didn't care much about the so-called safe house. Because his body containing deity's power is the best safe house. Polaris rolled his eyes, then looked at the ruins in front of him in silence. From this point of view, Lorna's profile is really invincible, the kind that both men and women kill. Her delicate facial features and long dark green hair are like an elf falling into the world. "Then what are your plans next?" Yeling asked. Lorna shook her head and said, "John's phone has been unreachable. I'm afraid something will go wrong and I won't be able to join them for the time being." Yeling knew that Lorna had just been invited by Yvonne to become the leader of the mutant organization, so she didn't have too deep feelings for that group of people. "Then you might as well listen to my idea. I plan to settle in New York," Yeling said casually. After hearing this, Lorna suddenly raised his head and glanced at Yeling with surprised eyes. In the dark director's office at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Nick Fury, the mother of Kerr, is taking inventory of his belongings. The electricity bills saved recently and the public funds borrowed can build another safe house. Where can we build it this time? At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Who? Nick Fury raised his head warily and looked outside with his remaining right eye. "Chief, it's me, Phil Coulson. Come in." Hearing this voice, Nick Fury breathed a sigh of relief and quickly hid a thick stack of safe house information in the safe under the table. "Director, I can't see where you are." Seeing the director activate the racial ability invisibility skill, Phil Coulson looked confused. At this moment, Nick Fury has merged into darkness. Phil Coulson knew that the director often used this trick to put pressure on those recruiters when recruiting people. Nick Fury, who was sitting at the table, cursed angrily, "Mom Zafok, I'm right here, right in front of you. Why don't you turn on the lights? Are you guarding against snipers? Phil Coulson was a little surprised. Well, that's it. Nick Fury nodded, pretending to be calm. What do you want from me? Phil Coulson's expression became serious. Director, the previous mutant killed Grey Shadow, and the Continental Hotel chose to back down. He has been responsible for following up on this matter. The responsibility of S.H.I.E.L.D. is very simple, that is, it can manage everything that should be managed and should not be managed. However, their main attention is still on those extraordinary powers that can subvert the order. The mutant named Yeling shows such potential. Mom Zafok, damn mutant. As a level 10 paranoid patient, Nick Fury actually does not discriminate against mutants. He discriminates against any individual or organization that is not under his control. I originally thought that without the Professor and Magneto, Mutant would be able to calm down a bit, but who would have thought that Yeling would suddenly pop up now? Phil Coulson, who likes reading comics, said to himself, I always feel that this Yeling's ability is a bit familiar, as if I have seen it there. Then, he continued, Director, do we need to intervene in this matter? One-eyed dragon Nick Fury shook his black braised egg head, pointed to the top of his head and said, Mutant is just an internal conflict, our real enemy is at the top. Ever since he and Captain Marvel drove away the Kree decades ago, Nick Fury has been strongly wary of aliens. In order to deal with possible alien attacks, he embezzled a large amount of public funds to build safe houses around the world, leaving behind countless backup men. Moreover, Nick Fury doesn't think Yeling can last long alone. Facing the pursuit of the military and the Supervisory Bureau without supplies, intelligence, or backup, you might hear news of the other party's arrest tomorrow. At the moment, Pierce, the Hydra elite leader upstairs, suddenly shuddered and became confused. Why do I suddenly have a bad feeling? Did Nick find something? Chapter 13 I come, I conquer. Please give me flowers and collect them. John can't continue like this. Their encirclement is getting tighter and tighter. We must find a way to break out as soon as possible. In the sewer of a small city on the US-Mexico border, along with a dazzling white light, Eclipse Max's anxious voice sounded. The Supervisory Bureau's equipment has suddenly been upgraded to a new level, and we can't keep distance at all. In the smelly sewer, John shook his head, feeling helpless. Yesterday the Supervisory Authority, with increased firepower, raided their mutant underground base. If John had not been in the army and had not made some arrangements in advance, they would have become prisoners long ago. However, no matter how they moved and escaped, Hyena soldiers armed with various high-tech equipment were always in hot pursuit. Along the way, all three of their safe houses were discovered. Some people were seriously injured and fell to the ground, while others were captured and escaped like animals. In the end, they were forced into the sewer, but the Supervisory Bureau's manpower was already in place in advance and information blocking measures were taken. Since being separated from Polaris, their calls have been subject to various types of monitoring and interference. Therefore, during this period, they could only remain silent. In fact, even if he could make a call, John didn't know who to call, and no one could help them. Otherwise. As he spoke, Max glanced at the exhausted mutants behind him without leaving any trace. Their ability is very weak and their physical strength is not good, so keeping them will only hinder them. Max, who had just joined the organization a few days ago, didn't have much sympathy for them. No, we can't abandon any of our compatriots. John flatly refused. At the same time, he was very disappointed in Max. Max reminded a little reluctantly, these bastards are trying to drain us of our energy little by little. If this continues, we will be wiped out in one fell swoop. Who else can save us then? Eclipse believes that keeping strong players like them is the most correct approach. If it was taken away from the pot, it would be all over. Retain the vitality of the organization and still have the possibility of a comeback. After a moment of silence, John murmured to himself, "It would be nice if the X-Men didn't disappear." At the moment, he felt that the whole world was against him. He just wants to do something good. "Why is it so difficult in the sewer?" A group of panicked mutants also shouted in despair. "Is it true that no one can help us? We have done nothing wrong. We have never wanted to hurt anyone. Why are you doing this to us?" In the command vehicle in the distance, Campbell, wearing a suit and tie, looked contentedly at the few spots of light slowly being surrounded in the barrier. He picked up the walkie-talkie and ordered, "Come in, take them all away, try to capture them alive, and shoot them if they resist." After giving the order, Campbell picked up the expensive red wine next to him and poured himself a glass of celebratory wine in advance. At the same time, on a busy street in downtown Manhattan, New York, Lorna, carrying a backpack, muttered, "You're crazy, and so am I." In the past, yelling caused heavy losses to the people of the Supervision Bureau, plus the killer of the so-called Killer Empire. No matter how you look at it, they should choose to flee the country and hide somewhere beyond the control of the Supervision Bureau. As a result, the two of them were now walking on the street like nothing happened, and their walking postures were even more arrogant than ordinary people. Lorna still feels that it is too dangerous to stay in New York, and there might be snipers targeting them now. How are they going to deal with the constant stream of killers? However, even so, Polaris never wanted to leave alone. She chose to advance and retreat together with Yelling without any hesitation. "Have you forgotten my ability?" Yelling looked indifferent. What? Lorna was a little confused. Yelling looked at the clouds and said, "I am a god on Earth." He regards New York as a starting point, and his end point is far more than just the stars and the sea. The second point of the second chapter is, "I want to create a world that belongs to me." Moreover, Yelling is definitely qualified to say this. Superman is not called the god of Earth for no reason. In his heyday, the extraordinary was simply incompetent and a true god. Yelling, who has the golden Superman bloodline, has even greater potential than Superman. Each of the abilities of Golden Superman has almost unlimited potential, and can easily reach the peak of the single universe, and even reach the multi-universe level. The current elementary level Man of Steel is only indestructible, but in the end, it will become an eternal blessing similar to immortality. With the Man of Steel in his strongest form, Golden Superman can even survive the reboot of the universe. Like super flight, it can also be extended infinitely. It starts by overcoming gravity, flying above the ground, and tapping its potential. After that, it can even exceed the speed of light and leap through time and space. Flight ability across the universe and time, this is the ultimate form of super flight. Gold Superman's other abilities all have the same potential, and he can become infinitely stronger, evolve infinitely, and finally surpass everything. With such ability, Yelling just wants to be a Homelander who does whatever he wants. He has already been educated in 9 years of compulsory education. He really didn't take him seriously, just a world king in the Marvel Universe. The reason for choosing New York is also very simple, it is because the famous Iron Man is here. It was this man who started the story of Avengers and the era of superhero explosion. However, these have little to do with Yelling. Now he just wants to use Tony Stark to solve the military's troubles. Thinking of this, Yelling raised his head and looked at the towering luxury building in front of him. Polaris also followed Yelling's gaze and saw the Stark Industries logo. She knew that this was a famous arms company, a giant like a giant. Thinking of this, Lorna asked curiously, "You want to ask Tony Stark for help? Do you know him?" "I don't know him, but he will know me soon." After saying that, Ye-Ling walked towards the building. Polaris Lorna quickly followed. "You don't know him, how can you ask him to help?" At this time, Ye-Ling had already walked into the technologically advanced Stark building and came to the front desk. The OL at the front desk is a standard white-collar beauty, with a curvy front and a curvy back, and is full of charm. She fits Tony Stark's aesthetic at first glance. Smelling the stimulating scent of perfume on her body, Ye-Ling frowned and said to the beautiful receptionist, "I'm Ye-Ling, I'm looking for Stark." When the beauty receptionist saw Ye-Ling's face, her eyes lit up, but when she saw his ordinary clothes, she immediately showed disdain. How could such a poor guy know the incredibly wealthy CEO Stark? She lowered her head and looked at her phone and said, "Sir, please leave without an appointment, otherwise I will call security." At this moment, Polaris also came over and persuaded, Ye-Ling, "Do you know who Tony Stark is?" That's bang! Boom! There was a loud noise, Ye-Ling punched out, and the entire front desk suddenly collapsed. At this time, he said calmly to the stunned female receptionist, "If you don't want to be like this receptionist, then call Tony Stark immediately and ask Ye-Ling to find him." Chapter 14, 5 minutes. "Let Stark come to see me. Please give me flowers, please collect." Stark International Group Building. Looking at the wooden counters scattered on the floor, the beautiful receptionist was stunned for a few seconds. After that, she realized what the situation was now. Then she gingerly picked up the phone that had fallen to the ground. After the call was connected, she said in a trembling voice, "Mr. Stark, there is a person named Ye-Ling who wants to meet you." "Ye-Ling Chinese? I don't know you." Stark spoke in an extremely perfunctory tone on the 53rd floor of the building. While he took a deep sip of red wine into his mouth, he glanced at the hot blonde next to him and mouthed, "Wow! She is indeed this month's cover girl." Fluffy blonde hair, flaming red lips and a gourd-like figure are exactly what he likes. Noticing Stark's unabashed look, the young blonde beauty giggled at Tony Stark and her eyes became provocative. The beauty at the front desk waited for a while, but there was no response even though she didn't hang up. She wanted to push, but didn't dare. At the moment, Ye-Ling grabbed the phone unceremoniously and said directly, "Tony Stark, you have failed this city. No, I know the truth about your parents' death. Give you 5 minutes, come down and see me. It's really ridiculous. My parents died in a car accident. They were not killed at all." Before Stark could finish his words, a busy tone came from the phone and the other party had hung up the phone. Fake. He threw away the phone in his hand, his expression changing rapidly. "What's wrong?" Noticing that Stark's face looked wrong, the blonde beauty was a little confused. Stark shook his head and said, "It's okay, but this is another joker who wants to be famous and crazy. By the way, I'm not in the mood right now. Let's make a date next time." In the lobby on the first floor, Polaris Lorna glanced at the panicked crowd, smiled contemptuously, then turned to Ye-Ling and said, "Is your method really feasible?" "Don't worry." Ye-Ling smiled confidently. Until the last time they met, Tony Stark was still having trouble with his father with a sullen face. Tony Stark's words "I love you, Dad" that he couldn't say in the end were the pain in his heart forever. Even though Stark is extremely wealthy and has an extremely brilliant mind, he still can't pass this test. After his parents were killed, Stark could only use alcohol and beauty to anesthetize himself and escape his grief. Therefore, Stark will not let go of any news related to his dead parents. At this moment, an arrogant voice sounded behind the two of them, Lorna Dane, 16 years old, mutant, codenamed Polaris, was adopted as a child, now has no fixed address, and is wanted by the regulatory agency and the military. Yeling, 16 years old, mutant, codenamed Long Nose, also has no relatives, and is also wanted by the Supervision Bureau and the military. Your simple background is as simple and weak as your minds. The two of them turned around and saw Stark's stinky face that often appeared in newspaper headlines. Tony Stark, who was holding a tablet at the moment, continued, "So you can't deceive the great Tony Stark, you can't even know. But you still came down, didn't you?" Yeling looked indifferent. Stark International Building, 53rd floor, in the President's office. Polaris and Yeling are sitting on the sofa. Stark murmured while hurriedly making coffee for the two of them, "No one dares to use the great Stark like this. He can't say anything without drinking coffee. It's really ridiculous." At the moment, Polaris put away the green light in his hand and whispered to Yeling, "The material in this room is very special. My ability is severely suppressed." Tony, who was making coffee, said proudly, "This is the latest technology, using non-metallic polymer materials, with some of my exclusive secret recipes added to it. This is the tiniest of my many great inventions, designed specifically for you mutants. After all, you mutants almost destroyed New York not long ago." After listening to Tony's words, Yeling raised his eyebrows and reminded, "By the way, I need to add sugar to my coffee. If it doesn't taste good, I won't say anything." "That's enough." Tony Stark slammed the coffee cup in his hand onto the table, splashing some coffee liquid that didn't look the right color. Then, he looked back at Yeling and said with an indifferent expression, "I admit that your little trick was good and successfully attracted my attention, but if you dare to lie to me, I guarantee that you will die miserably. If this guy dares to joke about his dead parents, Stark will let them know what it means to be an arms giant in the capital world. Don't worry, I won't let you down." After saying that, Yeling came to the window and looked down. Seen from this angle, the car looks like a beetle and the small person looks like an ant. The threat that Tony Stark thought he had was as powerful as these cars and people. Then, Yeling turned his head and glanced at Tony Stark, "Your parents were killed by Bucky the Winter Soldier. Tony, Colonel Rhodes, and Mr. Obadiah are urging me again." Sweet blonde Pepper walked in quickly, and then she couldn't say the rest. Looking at Stark, who was looking at a young handsome guy, she was stunned for a moment and continued, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you had guests, but Mr. Obadiah, the Vice President, specifically reminded that the latest weapons display event in Afghanistan can no longer be postponed." At the moment, Tony suddenly turned his head and glanced at Pepper and said, "I understand, you go out first, and I will give you a satisfactory answer later." Pepper was a little uncomfortable hearing such a serious answer, and she subconsciously carefully looked at the situation of the three of them. At the moment, Stark's eyes were reddish, his expression was a little nervous, and his body was shaking slightly, completely different from his usual appearance. Yeling in front of the window looked calm. Polaris crossed his arms and looked cold. Pepper had a question mark on his face. "What is going on?" Chapter 15. Let us have a small goal first. Please give me flowers and collect them. Seeing that the two young men didn't look like heinous villains, and Tony didn't say a code word to hint that he was being held hostage, Pepper left. However, she still had some doubts in her heart. After Pepper left, Stark could no longer hold back the excitement in his heart. He stepped forward and grabbed Yeling's shoulders, anxiously saying, "Tell me." Yeling didn't move his feet, his shoulders shook slightly. Suddenly Stark felt an irresistible force passing through the other party's body. He stepped back several steps before standing still and maintaining his balance. Ye-Ling looked at Stark and reminded, "There is no free lunch in the world. You can't get information for nothing, right?" Stark immediately said, "You want to solve the troubles you and your girlfriend are facing? That's easy. I can let you get fully legal status and cancel your wanted status." Polaris frowned when he heard the word girlfriend, but didn't say much. "This is not enough," Ye-Ling said seriously, "we need more money." "What else do you want?" Stark said patiently, knowing that it would be hard to do anything hard. The only thing he was lucky about was that these two people still behaved themselves. "I originally thought that this room could restrain mutant ability, but judging from the power Ye-Ling just showed, it was not affected at all." Ye-Ling replied slowly, "The first one is very simple, just like you said you will help us solve the military's problems and our identity issues. The second one is also very simple, we need a villa. As for the third item, I want 50% of Stark Industries." Stark refused without thinking, "Stop dreaming. It's just a piece of information that I don't know is true or false, and you want to take away so many shares of our group. This is simply impossible. Today's Stark International Group is very complex. Even if he wants to transfer these shares, it will not be easy." And Stark thought very simply, since Ye-Ling can know, then there must be others who know. If you can't get anything out of Ye-Ling, just start somewhere else. Ye-Ling thought about it and felt that it seemed impossible. If Stark wanted to know the information again, he would not trade shares of Stark Industries. In fact, when Ye-Ling proposed the conditions, he didn't think that much at all. The third condition is like an unexpected fortune to him. If he picks it up, he will make a profit, but if he doesn't pick it up, he will have no loss. With Ye-Ling's strength, wealth, fame, and fortune are all at his fingertips, and the current deal with Tony is just a matter of convenience. Therefore, Ye-Ling casually said, "Then let's set a small goal, just give it $100 million US. Half a day later, Pepper walked into the luxurious office that had been transformed according to Tony's preferences. At the moment, Stark, who used to be cheerful and out of shape, was in an uncharacteristic daze. She asked with some worry, "Tony, that $100 million US?" Seeing Stark in this state, Pepper's heart tightened, and she couldn't ask the question that was on her lips. She had never seen Stark so depressed. On the sofa, Stark, holding a bottle of red wine in his hand, forced a smile and said, "That money was used by me, and the company's money was used to tell the IRS that this was a normal flow of funds. You don't have to worry about this. Also, there's no need to make that look. I'm Tony Stark and I'm undefeated." Pepper glanced at Stark angrily, still holding on. However, in the end, she didn't say anything more and just left. She didn't even mention the display of the latest weapons. Since Stark didn't want to talk, Pepper didn't continue to ask. Because as the other person said, he is Tony Stark, and no one can ask him what he doesn't want to say. ch11-20. After Pepper left, Stark put down the bottle of wine in his hand, opened the computer on the table and said with a cold look, "Search the world's networks to find information about the Winter Soldier and Bucky. When searching, I allow you to temporarily lift all restrictions and invade any network." ch.a.r.v.i.s is Stark's most proud work and is the world's highest level artificial intelligence. He has been consciously limiting the development of ch.a.r.v.i.s in order to avoid unpredictable results. But now Tony Stark just wants revenge, even if it means rivers of blood, he doesn't care. Ye-Ling, who had just walked out of the Stark building, suddenly looked up and looked ahead. I saw a beautiful woman with a voluptuous figure and wearing a black leather coat walking directly in front of the two of them. The black-haired beauty has three-dimensional facial features, a gorgeous face, and a pair of big eyes that are aggressive and charming. "Hello Mr. Yeling, my name is Perkins, and I am the spokesperson of Continental Hotel." As she said this, the enchanting beauty Perkins handed the file bag in her hand to Yeling. "This is compensation from Continental Hotel. I hope Mr. Yeling will be satisfied." Yeling took the portfolio and found a business card attached to it. This business card is extremely simple, with only a phone number on the front and nothing on the back. Seeing this business card, Yeling frowned. Noticing Yeling's expression, Perkins' eyes became seductive and he said in a sweet tone, "Mr. Yeling, this is my number. If you have any needs, you can call me. Any needs are fine." Perkins put an emphasis on any need, almost making it clear. After saying that, Perkins turned and twisted away. Hearing this, Polaris suddenly raised his head and glanced at Perkins' enchanting back. He couldn't hide the look in his eyes that wanted to kill someone. Yeling was not fooled by Perkins' sweet side. Besides, the other party's smell is simply all five poisons, and you are still pretending to him here. Yeling knew that Perkins was also a bold and talented person. "In my memory, this person ignored the hotel rules and went directly to the Continental Hotel to kill the protagonist John, and even almost succeeded. After that, this woman made a comeback and killed two killers in a row, one of whom was Marcus, who was roasted by Yeling not long ago. However, this crazy woman also died because of her audacity, and in the end, Winston led people to clean up the house directly. After all, the most important rule of the Continental Hotel is, no killer can kill in the hotel. Except for the protagonist John, anyone who breaks the rules of the Continental Hotel will die." While thinking about it, Yeling threw the business card aside. "Anyway, I have memorized the numbers, and the intelligence of 100 points is not fake. If you really need it in the future, you can use it." Seeing Yeling's movements, Polaris, who was about to have a black aura next to him, calmed down and the green light in his hand slowly dissipated. Chapter 16: The Destruction of the Mutant Underground Organization. Please give me flowers and collection. In a set of 300-foot large flat roofs, Polaris and Yeling are overlooking the city that never sleeps. This is the top floor of the Central Building in Manhattan, New York. Thousands of skyscrapers are lit up all night long. If you want to fully enjoy this glorious and magnificent scenery, you only need $20 million. Manhattan is the smallest of New York's 5 boroughs, but it is the most densely populated. This is the economic, cultural, and commercial center of the United States, the area with the highest concentration of skyscrapers in the world, and the concentration of billionaires. Not even an inch of land or an inch of money can describe this place. Don't doubt it. The real estate in this place is just so outrageous. Yeling just acquired this property located on 57th Street, south of Central Park in New York, which is also the famous Billionaires Avenue. The price of this luxury house is even higher. Yeling is very satisfied with this luxurious suite given by Tony Stark. The layout of the entire room is full of artistic flavor, and even the hardware supplies are valuable works of art. It can be seen that Tony Stark carefully designed this ridiculously large apartment. The materials used in the house are also strong and light, and should be specially customized. Stark is indeed a smart man. Even though he was out of shape, he still made the right choice and did not occupy himself with some cheap apartments. Appreciating this rare beauty, Lorna rubbed her temples. That's it, we are safe. She still couldn't believe that Yeling's magical operation during the day was successful. Yeling shrugged and said, "What if that's not the case? In modern society, knowledge is power, technology is weapon, and Stark, with his genius mind, has the strongest weapon. Anyone who offends Stark will be beaten because his weapons are inferior to others. Therefore, Tony Stark has always been the father of the military, not to mention he is also a big capitalist. In the beautiful country, money is king. The military does not dare to offend Stark now, and it will even dare not offend him in the future. This little thing is just a phone call away from Tony Stark. Definitely this is also a matter of mutants' identity, which is not very serious in the first place. It's a bit ridiculous to say that although mutants have strong individual abilities, they are actually a weak group. The Mutant Act is just like other laws in beautiful countries, that is, it is effective for ordinary people. Ye-Ling didn't care at all about the troubles caused by mutants' identity. The military and the supervisory bureau can only bully ordinary people. Even if Ye-Ling is given another month, he can directly defeat the military. Just awakening the golden Superman bloodline, Ye-Ling only needs to bask in the sun and gain experience points to become stronger. He doesn't have any superhero complex. It's better to enjoy life on his good days. That's why Ye-Ling was too lazy to continue entangled with the military and chose to make a deal with Tony Stark. According to previous game experience, the previous levels can be improved quickly, but the improvement in strength is not significant. The few attribute points provided by upgrade are not as many as those provided by basking in the sun. Not to mention, the abilities of Gold Superman Awakening are all top-notch. Therefore, dealing with weak enemies is almost a waste of time for Ye-Ling. If you really want to become stronger, you should still fight with the strong. And Ye-Ling's current strength is completely sufficient in this era when superheroes have not yet exploded. The world of Marvel is very deep. Until you are absolutely invincible, you just need to be strong enough. It is not a good thing to be too high profile and attract the attention of big bosses. Under the light, Polaris's green eyes suddenly lit up. Does that mean everyone is safe from now on? Everyone no longer has to hide around. Ye-Ling immediately said, "Wake up, Tony Stark only promised to solve the identity problem between the two of us. It is impossible for him to protect the entire mutant race. In fact, it is not impossible. This is the same as Nick Fury protecting the Skrull who imitates other people at will. Everything still depends on interests. Even though mutants are a little different from ordinary people, they are still Earthlings after all, and Skrulls are full-fledged aliens. However, the Skrulls completely surrendered to Nick Fury. If mutants can also sacrifice their lives for Stark, maybe Stark can also protect the entire mutant clan. After all, the persecution and restrictions on the mutant community are just tricks of the upper class. In fact, to put it bluntly, it is very simple, that is, ordinary people can't make any waves no matter how violent they are, but mutants can really threaten some people's seats or even their heads. But even if Stark had the intention to conquer the mutants, Ye-Ling would not participate. This kind of thing must be very troublesome, and he is not the boss of mutant. Ye-Ling, who only wants to enjoy life, will definitely not take the initiative to get involved in such troubles. Ye-Ling has no interest in leading the current group of mutants. They are too weak. Like the previous Professor X, although he is in a wheelchair, he can even kill humans around the world with the help of instruments. As for Magneto, he is an absolute showman, able to manipulate the Golden Gate Bridge like noodles. If these two people are still there, Ye-Ling is still interested in the position of mutant boss, or someone as beautiful as Polaris or Dark Phoenix is worthy of him. As far as some current mutants are concerned, Ye-Ling can only say that sometimes the Mutant Act is not so stringent. With weak strength and poor quality, it would be a good thing for this group of people to be imprisoned. After saying those words, Polaris knew that he was naive. She pursed her lips and looked a little regretful. During the sentry experiment, Dr. Campbell, who was wearing a suit and a greasy face, looked at the restrained mutants in front of him with high spirits. At this moment, in the house, John, Max, and many other mutants from the underground organization were all present, many of them. Except for Yeling and Lorna, all mutants have been captured. At this point, the mutant underground organization can be declared disbanded. John is a little better, his ability allows him to have outstanding defense, and he doesn't suffer much damage even if he is caught. Max was not so lucky. Because he resisted too much, he was given intensive care. His eyes turned into panda eyes, his face was bruised, and there was still blood under his nose that had not completely dried up. During the experiment, Max no longer had the calmness he once had, and struggled desperately to use ability again. However, each of them was wearing a flea collar developed by Sentry Labs. This thing is specifically aimed at their mutants. Whenever they use ability, a red light will flash and give them an electric shock. This new equipment provided by Osborne Industries is really powerful. It will wipe out all of you little mice in one fell swoop. At the moment, Campbell was very proud and continued to face this group of trophies. Originally, these equipment were prepared for that Yeling. You guys are unlucky, and pretended to be in the crosshairs of the gun. At this moment, a red light flashed across Eclipse Max's neck, and then his body twitched and fell to the ground. It turns out that Max just wanted to activate ability and raid Campbell to change the situation, but unfortunately failed. Seeing this scene, Campbell raised his black leather shoes and stepped heavily on Max, who fell to the ground. Damn mutant! At this moment, a subordinate who looked a little pale and looked seriously ill came over with a satellite phone and whispered, "General Allen's phone number." Campbell glared hard at Max, who had his head raised and looked very unconvinced, then took the phone and showed a flattering smile. Chapter 17 Compensation from Continental Hotel. Please give me flower tickets. There was silence in the entire laboratory. Several other mutants didn't dare to breathe. Eclipse Max, who was lying on the ground, looked unwilling, but in the end he did not choose to continue resisting. John, who tried his best to block his companions with his body, was a little confused. Did that bastard just say Yeling wasn't Yeling caught together with Polaris? No, isn't Yeling's ability weak? Is it necessary to go to such trouble to catch him? For a moment, John was confused and couldn't figure out what happened. At the moment Campbell had finished the phone call and his face became very ugly. Then he looked at the restrained John and the others with fierce and unwilling eyes. The deputy next to him, who looked as pale as a dead man, asked, "Doctor, are we going to follow the original plan and use these people to threaten the two mutants and make them obey?" Campbell muttered. "No need, pull back everyone outside. From today on, those two mutants are no longer under our control." The deputy and other subordinates were very confused. They had invested so much energy and resources and lost so many people. If you give up now. But all the previous efforts were wasted. Besides, victory is right in front of us. It would be a shame to give up just like that. Take these people down and lock them up for me. I will entertain them later," Campbell said loudly with a gloomy face. Although the subordinates still had doubts in their hearts, they still obeyed the order and took Max, John, and other mutants down with them. Soon, Campbell was the only one left in the entire laboratory. He looked grim and said to himself, "You are so powerful, you can actually persuade Tony Stark." This time, Tony Stark was very forceful and determined to keep these two mutants. If you go against Stark, you will need to invest huge amounts of money and resources. Osborne Industries felt that a project with an uncertain future was not enough to justify the expense. Therefore, Osborne Industrial Group chose to temporarily shelve the cooperation plan. Lieutenant General Allen also wanted to wait and see for the time being and stop all actions against Yelling and Lorna Dane. Campbell, who had invested a lot of resources in the project, was unwilling to just give up. After thinking about it, he took out a black confidential phone from his pocket, dialed the only number on it, and said in a cold voice, "Start the ch11 plan to the maximum extent." Yelling, who is wearing a high-end suit and sipping wine in a luxurious flat-top building in Manhattan Central Building, closed his property panel. In terms of level, there is no change, it is still level 3, but it has a little more experience. The Golden Superman bloodline has also slowed down after the initial burst period, and this process will not be too slow. This is mainly a process of bloodline integration and awakening, and letting nature take its course is the best choice. Yelling thinks this is good. If he suddenly gained power over the gods, Yelling might actually become a complete ancestor. He just doesn't want to be restricted by anyone, he just wants to enjoy life freely and leisurely, and he doesn't want to be a slave to power. Appropriate blacken is good for physical and mental health, but complete blacken is not advisable. As for the superhero who shouts with great ability comes great responsibility, in Yelling's opinion, he has pure cerebral palsy, with nothing left in his mind except political correctness. Treating justice as a kind of responsibility is originally a kind of moral kidnapping and an insult to justice. This is why I have the nerve to call myself a superhero. Shaking his head, Yelling did not continue to dwell on this issue. Anyway, superheroes and dogs are inappropriate here. He picked up the file bag on the table and looked at it. It felt quite solid. In addition to some documents, there was also a box inside. When Yelling opened it, the first thing that caught his eye was a heavy box of killer gold coins, which were real hard currency. Ordinary killers may only have a few left after working for a year, so their value is very high. In addition, there are 2 car keys in the portfolio. One is a specially modified bulletproof Hummer, and the other is a motorcycle that can travel quickly through the city. Finally, there are the numbers of several professionals who can be made to do anything for the cost of killer gold coins. Compared to the inhumanity of Stark, the big dog owner, the Continental Hotel is more practical. These things are not necessary for Yelling, but they do provide a lot of convenience. At the very least, Continental Hotel has expressed sincerity. There is a reason why this organization can continue to this day. Thinking of this, Yelling pushed these things to Polaris. "You put them away, I won't need these." Lorna took the file bag and looked at it curiously. She first noted down where the 2 cars were parked. The 2 cars in the photo, Beast, are full of style and have a bit of a hardcore rock vibe, and she likes them very much. Because of her ability, Lorna has a special liking for this metal muscle style, which uses particularly solid metal creations. Then, she looked at the numbers and related businesses, and said with some surprise, "Is New York so dangerous?" Just a task of cleaning up the scene can be broken down to such an extent, and there are still several people fighting for it. The criminal industry chain in New York has been broken down to this extent. This is too complicated. What do you think? New York's title of crime capital is not for nothing. Yelling remembers not to look at the coquettish Gotham in the world next door, but the crime rate is only 48%. New York in the real world has reached 53%. Not to mention, the New York in front of us is a combination of the Marvel world, extraordinary abilities, and rapid pursuit. And some other messy worlds that Yelling may not know yet. In terms of crime rate, New York in this variety comic dimension can beat the simple folk customs of Gotham City. In ordinary New York, there can be tens of thousands of shooting incidents a year, let alone this chaos-enhanced version of New York. To be honest, if the residents in that corner of Hell's Kitchen don't hear some firecrackers at night, they probably won't be able to sleep well. Yeling feels that the homeless people here can enjoy themselves by picking up bullet casings and selling them every day. Here, crime is just a job, and criminals are just a less respectable profession. Do you make money? It's not shabby. However, Yeling had no intention of improving the situation. This is a social problem and a world problem, and the kind of superhero activities that play house will not change anything at all. Moreover, he felt that this was not without its benefits. This kind of high-intensity interaction between people can also maintain the fighting spirit and survival ability of the people of New York. This is the so-called catfish effect. Maybe the people of New York who have been trained and strengthened will be able to survive subsequent major events, such as abominations and alien invasions. Chapter 18 Polaris Who can sleep? Please give me flowers. In the luxuriously decorated room, Yeling is wiping her wet hair. At the same time, he was thinking a little boredly. It's okay to take a shower, but what if I need to shave in the future when the golden Superman bloodline is fully developed? This beard and hair will be tens of millions of times harder than steel bars. Is it really like Superman using a mirror to reflect heat ray to shave? It's really funny when you think about it. At this moment, Yeling heard a knock on the door. There were two people in the huge room, and it was easy to figure out that it was Lornest knocking on the door. It's just that it's so late. Is there anything you can't talk about tomorrow? Yeling opened the door with some confusion. Under the dim light, Polaris in a white dress looked like a hibiscus in clear water, indescribable. With breakable snow-white skin, extremely beautiful eyes like emeralds, and long dark green hair with a fantasy color, it's not enough to describe her beauty. I can only say that she is as beautiful as a fairy, not like a mortal. At the moment, looking at Yeling with perfect figure and sharp eyebrows, the fairy-like Polaris eyes were a little erratic. She raised the wine bottle in her hand and said with twinkling eyes, I heard this wine is very delicious, but I can't finish it by myself. Yeling was stunned for a while, then showed a naughty smile. It's not because you can't sleep without me, right? Polaris blushed. Don't accuse someone of their innocence out of thin air. Yeling just smiled slightly. He is not a straight man, so he will not continue to embarrass Polaris. Don't laugh. I'm serious. I didn't smile, I just curled up the corners of my mouth. As he spoke, Yeling, who was wearing a bath towel, opened the door, turned around and walked back to sit on the leather sofa in the room. He doesn't know much about Polaris' situation, but no matter how strong she is, Polaris is just a little girl, and an extremely insecure little girl. The ability of controlling magnetic field can protect her body, but not her mind. The enemies they face these days are much stronger than before. Polaris doesn't know everything and has absolute strength, so he will definitely feel very nervous. Polaris probably felt at ease only when he was by his side, and thus adapted to his presence. So even though it was safe, Polaris still couldn't sleep after leaving Yeling. This is actually a form of dependence, but it's not serious. But it doesn't matter, Yeling will make it serious. After Polaris sat down, Yeling raised his glass and said calmly, no matter what, you don't have to worry as long as I'm here. Polaris's eyes lit up while he was holding the wine glass, and he was very moved inside, but on the surface he still raised his head and said, what big talk are you talking about? Seeing Polaris in this state, Yeling nodded secretly in his heart. Although Magneto's family are all good people, they are really miserable. Compared to Professor. Basically, they lost their parents when they were young, and then began to live a homeless and precarious life. Therefore, both Polaris and Wanda are extremely eager to have a place to settle down in a warm home. Simply put, they just lack love. Yeling happens to be very philanthropic. He felt that he and the two young ladies were a perfect match. In his mind, Yeling has already begun to imagine himself hugging Miss Polaris and saying to Wanda, "Don't break up this family, come join this family." Maybe they can influence this pair of top sisters, and they are definitely more likely to be stunned by origin magic power. However, he doesn't care, that's why the Man of Steel exists, to sacrifice for love, and Yeling is very willing to do so. It always feels like you are thinking of something bad. Looking at Yeling, who was suddenly distracted, Lorna felt a chill all over her body. She had an inexplicable urge to pick up the wine glass and splash it in Yeling's face. Yeling looked upright and said, "Yes, I am thinking about letting your relatives get together and never be separated. Even if there is only one person, I still live well." Thinking of her unknown biological parents, Lorna took a deep sip of wine. No matter how famous the wine is, it still tastes bitter and not delicious at all. "Me too." Yeling compared his muscles and made an "I am strong" gesture. At the moment, Yeling's clothes were half unbuttoned, revealing her finely decorated upper body. That body is full of beauty. It can only be said that she doesn't need makeup to play some beautiful fighting bosses. Looking at Yeling showing off, Polaris curled his lips and took a sip of red wine, but his body felt a little hot and uneasy. These steel-like muscles and perfect figure, as well as her boyfriend's overpowering sense of security and self-immolation warmth, all made her dazzled. After just 2 glasses of wine, Polaris became drunk. Looking at Polaris, whose face was reddish and whose eyes were rippling, Yeling also felt a little thirsty. He quickly bought a few more drinks. "I have to say that Stark is indeed a rich man. The house is full of good wine. He doesn't get drunk at all, but just feels a little dizzy. This means that everyone gets drunk even if the wine is not drunk." Then, a baby-like sleep awaits the two of them. On the cliffs of the Malibu coast, a huge villa full of technology stands. This is a built-in multi-story house with windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean. But at the moment it was midnight, not a good time to enjoy the sea view. Not to mention that Stark, who had red eyes at the moment, only wanted to fill the sea with certain people and did not want to look at the sea. He looked at the open tablet in front of him and waited restlessly. At this moment, a soft male electronic voice sounded in the room, "Mr. Stark, the search is complete. We found 17,122 pieces of information related to the Winter Soldier and Bucky. After filtering, 3 pieces of information are retained for review. Open it and show it to me." Tony Stark stared at the computer screen, and soon 3 files popped up. He opened them one by one and saw them. After a moment, Stark frowned. "The Russians. Hydra. Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency, what the hell are these?" Except for the polar bear in the front that everyone yells about, which is relatively normal, Stark has never heard of the 2 in the back. Chapter 19, "This 50 million is so profitable, please give me flowers." In the villa, Stark got up and walked around a few times. After frowning and thinking for a while, a mysterious star-like face flashed in his mind. Stark stopped hesitating and immediately changed into his suit and buttoned the tablet on the table. Just as Stark was holding the tablet and preparing to go out, the soft voice of J.A.R.V.I.S continued to sound, "Mr. Stark, are you going out? Would you like me to contact Mr. Happy for you? Your current condition is not suitable for driving." J.A.R.V.I.S is the first artificial intelligence developed by Stark. Stark not only put a lot of energy and effort into it, but also put a lot of emotion into it. Therefore, the current j.a.r.v.i.s will show concern for Stark, and will even take the initiative to answer Pepper's call for Stark at critical moments and provide assistance. After j.a.r.v.i.s became part of Vision, Stark became aware of the potential threat of artificial intelligence. So he changed his mind and directly removed the emotional module of artificial intelligence. Later, j.a.r.v.i.s replacement, AI Friday, was a more traditional AI with no emotions. After Iron Man died, Friday simply said, "There is no sign of life." The current j.a.r.v.i.s is Stark's best assistant and a warm-hearted companion. Since he had no friends, he made one himself. This is the arrogance of a genius inventor. After thinking about it, Stark nodded and said, "Tell Happy to get a low-profile car. The message has been delivered. Have a nice trip, sir." In front of the central apartment building in Manhattan, a sports car with passionate lines and full of power roared towards him like an angry bull. From the iconic bison logo and unique style, you can tell that this is a global limited edition Lamborghini. Such a luxury car can not only be bought with money, but also must have the corresponding status. In just a moment, the Lamborghini stopped like a lightning bolt in a gesture of disowning all relatives. This scene from movement to stillness fully reflects the excellent performance of this luxury car. Under a series of urgings from his employer, Stark, Happy, a middle-aged and kind-hearted man, almost turned into the will-o'-the-wisp boy again. Now that he finally reached his destination before the time limit, he wiped the sweat from his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. "Wait for me here." Stark, with red eyes, nodded with satisfaction, very satisfied with Harbin Beer's racing skills. Happy, who had a stocky face, was a little worried and said, "Mr. Stark, are you really going up alone? The people you want to see are the mutants. I heard that they..." After hearing that the person Stark wanted to see was mutant, Happy, the driver and bodyguard, was hesitant to speak. Stark drank a large cup of super strong coffee with red eyes, and said casually, facing that person, "If you want to ensure my safety, you have to bring an army." After saying that, he got out of the car without any hesitation and walked towards the central Manhattan apartment building ahead. Ye-Ling woke up in the luxurious master bedroom, which was almost beyond sight. He smelled the familiar fragrance and soft touch. Ye-Ling looked down and saw a face as perfect as Sleeping Beauty. He looked around, rubbed his brows, and recalled what happened yesterday, but he came up blank. Broken. There's something wrong with Stark's drinking. Although he doesn't get drunk or has a headache, he gets drunk easily and can knock him down now. Isn't that outrageous? Ye-Ling is very suspicious that Stark, with evil intentions, added ingredients to the wine to make it easier to knock down the models. There's definitely more to it than just drugging. Stark isn't that kind of person, and he doesn't bother to do that. But these wines must be the kind that make you drunk easily. This is also because his golden Superman bloodline has not been fully developed, otherwise it would be fine if he drank a bucket of it. However, when he looked at Polaris, a cute little bird next to him with an exquisite face, Ye-Ling suddenly felt that even if the wine was not intoxicating, the beauty would be. At this moment, Polaris's long eyelashes moved, his breathing became slightly faster, and his body became softer and hotter. But Polaris still didn't open his eyes. Just when the atmosphere was setting off well and moving in the direction Ye-Ling hoped for. Dong dong dong. There was a loud knock on the door outside. Ye-Ling's face darkened. Who is this so unqualified, disturbing people's dreams? At the same time, Polaris, who was sleeping, let out a crisp laugh. "So you came to ask me?" Ye-Ling looked at Stark speechlessly on the sofa. "I know the reason for the matter, but do you know what time it is? It's 5 in the morning. What's wrong, don't you have a watch? Stark raised his eyebrows. I have some good watches over there in the villa. You can go over and pick one out when you have time. This is a matter of appearance. Then it's settled. After hearing the first half of Stark's words, Yeling frowned and was about to express his dissatisfaction. Hearing the last sentence, he could only say, the boss is awesome. Anyway, Yeling has woken up. It is not a pleasure to earn a world-famous watch for free. It doesn't matter if he has more money or less, he just likes watches. At the moment, Stark took out his tablet. Do you know what Hydra is and what country it is? Since Yeling can accurately know the truth about the murder of his parents, he should know these two departments. Previously, he felt that only Yeling could not know the truth about his parents' murder, and even Yeling might only have a few clues. Maybe the other party knew it with the help of mutant ability. Tony Stark is very confident in his intelligence ability. However, even if he lifted the restrictions on JARVIS, he still did not collect any useful information. At this time, Stark realized that the water inside was deeper than he thought. Yeling's intelligence ability is much stronger than he expected. Therefore, Stark rushed over anxiously. Yeling stretched out his hand. If you want to know this question, do you need this number? 50 million, no problem. Tony Stark agreed without thinking. Yeling took a deep breath and thought to herself, I originally wanted 5 million, but damn, rich people are so hateful. So, he nodded and said, I know these two departments. Tony Stark was not surprised by this answer. While thinking about it, Stark listened intently, but after waiting for a long time, Yeling didn't respond. Where's down there? Stark was very dissatisfied. Why didn't he do something after spending money? The bottom is gone. You asked me if I knew these two departments. I have already answered. I said I know. In the face of the big benefactor, Yeling answered whatever he asked and was very honest. However, for this question, he was only prepared to ask for 5 million, but he didn't expect Stark to give him 50 million. 3 words cost $50 million. This rich man is too cruel. Stark, who had been staying up late, had a black eye and almost died on the spot. A sentence of I know costs 50 million, and capitalists will cry when they see it. You are so good at doing business. How about you take over my position as an arms giant? I would be ashamed of myself. Chapter 20. The mission system is opened. Please give me flowers. Just when the atmosphere was a bit tense, Polaris appeared in home clothes. She took 2 cups of steaming coffee, placed them on the table for 2, then turned and left. From beginning to end, she seemed completely uninterested in the conversation between the two. However, Yeling still knew the other party's true thoughts from the other party's secretly pricked up ears. It seems that this coffee is partly to give myself face, and partly to satisfy curiosity. Yeling first took a sip of coffee, and then admired the way Stark's cerebral blood vessels were about to burst. Seeing that the heat was about the same, Yeling smiled slightly and said, Okay, I won't tease you anymore. The 2 organizations you mentioned are secret organizations. Hydra is a terrorist organization that has existed for a long time. It helped Nazi Germany during World War II and did many bad things. As for the Homeland Bureau, it is a special force that specializes in dealing with various strange incidents. This organization is affiliated with the International Security Council. The current S.H.I.E.L.D. has not changed its name and is still using that awkward name. During this period, because the big event has not yet started, there are relatively few extraordinary events, and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s sense of existence is not that strong. Otherwise, Stark wouldn't be unable to get any information at all. Stark took a deep breath and said, "Then what is the relationship between these two organizations and that Winter Soldier Bucky? Was it one of them who killed my parents?" He had never heard of these two organizations, and even after searching the internet using JARVIS he did not get any useful information. It is enough to show how well these two organizations do intelligence work. Otherwise, he would not ask for help from Yeling. Yeling put down the coffee cup in his hand and said slowly, "Accurately, both are murderers because the two organizations have deep ties." Country. Forget it, let's call him SHIELD. This S.H.I.E.L.D. first destroyed Hydra, and then was eroded by Hydra. Now these two organizations are you and I have you. As the name suggests, Hydra has many heads and is difficult to kill. What does this S.H.I.E.L.D. do? Stark's expression turned ugly. Why does it sound so complicated? So where should he start to take revenge? Immediately Yeling replied, "Although S.H.I.E.L.D. has a low reputation, it actually has a lot of power and a lot of black technologies. Although many of your equipment have been sealed by you and have not been widely used on a large scale, they have actually been targeted and misappropriated by SHIELD. Theoretically, as long as it's not human belongings, the Land and Resources Bureau has the authority and ability to handle it. Just think of it as a special agency that specializes in supernatural events and individuals. Except for some special areas, it has law enforcement powers all over the world." Stark, who was holding the coffee cup, looked so shocked that he even forgot to put the cup down. Yeling's words were like opening a door to a new world for Stark, giving Stark a deeper understanding of this world. Seeing Stark's shocked look, Yeling said calmly, "Don't be so surprised. In fact, this department has a close relationship with you, because your father is the patriarch of this organization." "Then why did they kill my parents?" "Who is that?" Bucky Stark's face turned pale again when he mentioned his parents, and his heart ached again. "Actually, it was people from Hydra who killed your parents. What they wanted was a copy of the super serum." Yeling remembered this part of the plot very clearly. But there are so many pitfalls in the Marvel movie universe that it would take more than a day to explain them all. Stark nodded and said, "So it wasn't S.H.I.E.L.D. that killed my parents. But Hydra?" Yeling shrugged and said casually, "What's the difference? S.H.I.E.L.D. has become a sieve, and it has helped Hydra grow up. There is not much difference between the two now. As for Bucky, the Winter Soldier, this guy is Captain America's best friend. He's an upright and kind man who likes to eat plums. Bucky was captured during World War II, and then transformed into a secret weapon by people from the former Furry Bear country, and was completely brainwashed and controlled. Anyway, it was pretty miserable. There are so many secrets here." Stark looked ugly. "Why didn't you tell me last time?" Yeling said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Because you didn't ask." Stark? What he was thinking at the time was that if he wanted to know who was the person who killed his father, he could just investigate by himself. J.A.R.V.I.S would not be able to find out if he didn't believe it, so he just asked Yeling to leave. Stark didn't expect that Bucky would be involved in such a complicated secret, and also involved two very difficult secret organizations. His confidence at the time cost Stark 50 million in blood. To him, 50 million is definitely nothing, just drizzle. But the problem is that even billionaire Tony Stark doesn't want his money to be wasted. At this moment, Yeling ignored Stark's constipated look and took out a piece of paper from his arms and handed it to Stark. Stark was stunned for a moment, then took it and looked at it, only to see a bank number written on it. Yeling's meaning is very simple and direct, that is, "Boss, Make a payment. Stark was speechless and put the note away. I'll type it when I get back, but are you interested in accepting the commission? Then, he said very arrogantly, $100 million, help me find Bucky. If we can find someone from Hydra, $100,000 per person, and important people will pay more according to their status. Before, he was bent on finding the enemy who killed his parents, and he had trouble sleeping and eating because of this. But after really knowing the truth, Stark didn't know what to do. After all, he didn't expect that his enemies were so complex. When the company does some of the dirty work, Tony Stark's uncle Obadiah steps in to solve it. After all, Tony Stark is not a pure capitalist and is not proficient in traditional business warfare. However, he figured it out that as an honest, law-abiding citizen, it would be unwise to confront these terrorists head-on. It would be better to leave this matter to professionals. And the yelling in front of me is the best candidate. Hearing Tony Stark speak as a small target, or day-old version, Yelling instantly felt that he was hit by Chien ability. As expected of a man who plays with steel armor as a figurine, he is simply inhumane. But, I refuse. Yelling straightened her body, preparing to reenact a famous scene. As a golden Superman, the future Supreme King of the universe, how could he casually give up for 5 buckets of rice at this moment? A prompt appeared in the system in my mind. It has been detected that Tony Stark, the son of Destiny, has issued a mission, and the mission system is activated. So, Yelling changed the topic. Old man, you are so good at reading people.